Oh. I was gonna try to do like an action scene for the intro for this movie, but as it turns out, I am an out of shape middle aged man. And an out of shape middle aged man trying to do an action scene, well, that's the real horror. So, yeah, we're just gonna do this instead. I need a stunt double, guys. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below. It'll give you an idea of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But today, what we do is a little bit different. What we're doing is revisiting a horror subgenre that we've already talked about before, and adding a 4th doctorate level selection to it. And as you've probably seen from the thumbnail or from the title of the video, what we're revisiting is horror action. And in our original video on horror action, we talked about how horror action seems to be a little bit more mainstream because it really tends to be action movies with horror elements in it. And we talked a lot about how people probably like to kind of lean more towards calling these just action movies because horror has this connotation. It has a stigma to it that, as you know, I'm pretty against. And so you get this horror action subgenre getting a little bit maligned or a little bit ignored in favor of just kind of calling it straight action so that the movies can be more mainstream, because horror movies tend to be a little bit more niche. Action movies tend to have a little bit more broader appeal, especially overseas. And so that's, I think, what drives that kind of conversation. To me, it's all semantics. I mean, they're all action movies, but all action movies have some sort of horrific elements in it too, depending on what you want to talk about. But I digress. We all kind of know what we're talking about here. Action movies with horror elements. It'll become pretty clear when we go through the recap, and it'll be pretty clear when we talk about our doctor selection. So why don't we go ahead and just jump right into that recap right now. The first movie that we talked about in our horror action video was Underworld. And we talked about how when that movie came out, like many other movies, it kind of had, Matrix envy. It had an aesthetic that looked very much like the Matrix, but in a very cool way. Blue instead of green, but the same leather and latex outfits and everything like that. But a very cool aesthetic, and it had, at its core, a Shakespearean Romeo and Juliet kind of esque story that was, for the most part, working for me. The war between vampires and lycans, or werewolves, if you will, had some memorable images and cool ideas, and it built out a cool mythology, even though it really was more style than substance. The mythology was fun, enough fun to drive several sequels, a whole franchise, and it's a movie I enjoy. It's a movie that, the series is fun, but it's not too deep, so it's a fun action horror movie. It really does fit the bill for that, so this was the first one that we led off our video with. The next movie that we talked about was Predator. And Predator was Arnold Schwarzenegger at his peak and his total prime, and it's a classic movie. And again, it mostly considered action, but there's really good sci-fi and horror elements in this movie. In particular, the Predator himself, the monster, is very unique design, very scary, very creepy, very cool, and very horrific, frankly. But what drives this movie more than anything is just the really memorable characters and the chemistry between the actors playing those characters. I think that's what makes it so popular, so much fun, why people gravitate towards it and like it so much, and why it's endured as such a popular franchise. We talked about that quite a bit, and there's been some ups and some downs, a lot of downs, honestly, in the franchise. But we talked a little bit about the most recent installment of the franchise, Prey, and how much I liked that one. But the original Predator is a classic. Most of you have seen it, and those of you that haven't should really catch up, because it is a tremendous amount of fun, a great horror action film, and one of Arnie's best movies, frankly. And the last movie that we discussed in the horror action video was Aliens. And it was one of the rare times where we discussed the original movie Alien, and we're also discussing its sequel because it's that good. It's a true classic, and it actually scared me as a kid. It's not as horror as the original Alien. It is really more sci-fi and action, but there's a lot of scary stuff in there, especially if you're younger. I saw this as a child. I told the whole story about how it scared me as a child. And again, like Predator, really great characters, really quotable lines. It establishes, Sigourney Weaver's character Ripley as a true feminist icon. It's something that starts in Alien, but really gets solidified here. And we talked about that. And we talked about the debate. Is it better than the original one? This is the reason why I felt compelled to bring it up as its own separate entry into the syllabus, because I vacillate back and forth as to which one I like better. I love them both so much. I'm a huge fan of that franchise, primarily because of those first two movies. Aliens, the one of the rare situations where the sequel might even be better than the original, and definitely a great example of horror action and just a true classic movie in general. You should definitely see it if you haven't, but come on, you've seen it. So that's going to do it for our recap of the movies that we already talked about, and now it's time to talk about a new movie, a new doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection for the horror action subgenre is Day Shift. Day Shift came out in 2022 and is a Netflix release. And it was produced by Chad Stahelski, who is the director of the John Wick movies. And that's kind of important because this movie kind of reminded me a lot of John Wick in frankly mostly good ways, but it's definitely one that it seems like it's kind of gone under the radar. So I thought it'd make a pretty good doctor level selection, because I thoroughly enjoy this movie, although admittedly I might be in the minority on that one, but we're going to get into all that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie stars Jamie Foxx as a pool cleaner who is secretly actually a vampire hunter. But he's not making as much money as he used to because he's been expelled from his vampire hunter union. He's trying to get back in, and he is trying to get better pricing for his vampire fangs that he collects when he hunts. And he's having some trouble because he doesn't tend to follow the rules, and because there's a vampire plot going on, which is continually getting him into bigger and bigger trouble. But we're going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie for anybody who hasn't seen it before. But the movie is fun. The movie knows what it wants to be. The movie it's a horror action comedy, frankly. The basic premise seems to be, what if Blade was a pool cleaner and had a union? And you know what? I'm here for that. I really liked this movie for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the world building, the setup. And this is what I was hinting at when I was talking about Chad Stahelski and the John Wick thing. Because one of the best things about John Wick is the world that it sets up, this world of assassins, and how they have these codes and these rules and this whole system that works out. It's very fascinating. It's one of the funnest parts of the movie series. And Day Shift is, well, I'll be honest, liberally cribbing from this, but in a comedic way. The idea that these vampire hunters work amongst us as, laborers and things like that, and then they have their union. And the union has this set of rules, and it has union wages and everything like that, is funny. It's really funny to me. It worked for me very well. And the way they've set this up is pretty good, because you've got Jamie Foxx in there. Now, I got to confess up front, I'm not the biggest Jamie Foxx fan in the world. I do think he's a good actor. I just think he's a little overrated, but he's game here. He came to play, and he's got a fun supporting cast. The most notable one being Dave Franco, who is once being his sidekick as a union-appointed sidekick. His wife's played by Megan Good. Snoop Dogg shows up, because why not? As a cowboy vampire hunter, and it's hysterical. It's great. It's trying to have fun. It's got a plot. It's got this whole vampire real estate plot set in the valley. And I'll be honest, the plot's kind of meh. It's kind of whatever. The villain is not super intimidating. It's the one of the women from How to Get Away with Murder. She's fine. She's perfectly fine. Where the fun is in the world building and in the action, where again, having Chad Stahelski as the producer helps, because the John Wick action is amazing. Now, what they've done here is kind of a similar action style, but hyper real. It's not as realistic, so that it's more fun. It's gory. It's a super gory movie, but it's really a fun gory movie. The way that the vampires move, the way they can kind of shift their body and everything like that is super fun. And the way that they die is super gross and interesting. And the hyper real action it's fun. It's kinetic. It's a blast. And the movie is at its best when it's doing these things. A high point of the movie for me was the Nazarian brothers, who are kind of competing hunters that that Jamie Foxx's character teams up with for a little while, and one of them Scott Adkins. So he's doing his Scott Adkins stuff. For those of you who are action fans, know who Scott Adkins is. He's a martial artist, and he's great. And those scenes, that whole scene is hilarious and fun and gross. And again, hyper real. The way it's edited and the CGI aspects to the movie, kind of take you out of the realistic aspect of it. But who cares? Because it's fun. There's a great scene at one point in the movie where Jamie Foxx is fighting a vampire, and you see in the mirror, and all you can see is the vampire's clothes because the vampire doesn't have a reflection, but the clothes do. Which is the first time I've ever seen that addressed in a vampire movie, and I thought that was awesome. I loved it. And so, even though, again, the CGI, the special effects are clearly CGI special effects, they're fun. They're fun. And it is at its best when it's doing action because I'll be honest again, the humor is hit and miss. Sometimes I found it to be really funny. Sometimes I felt like the humor was trying a little too hard. I think Fox is better when he's playing it straight than when he's trying to crack jokes. I think Dave Franco probably went a little too far into the jokey territory. There's a joke about him peeing his pants, and they played it too many times. Like it was funny once, and then it kind of gets overused and beaten to death, if you will. But I do like that the movie is self-aware. It knows that it's campy. It knows that it's silly, and it's doing a good job of just kind of having fun with that, but still delivering on really fun action, really cool action. It looks good. The stunts are fun. They're a little surreal looking, but they're fun. Seeing everybody taking on these vampires who kind of like twist and turn their bodies around them, and seeing how hard they are to kill. Like the traditional methods for killing a vampire are in this movie, but they aren't as easy to accomplish as they are in other movies and stuff. And so I liked that. I thought that was fun, and it added to why there's so much cool action and martial arts and things like that and gore. I had a blast with this movie, man. This just kind of hit the sweet spot for me. I love me some vampire movies. I thought that the humor, while uneven, worked more often than it didn't, and I really liked the action scenes. I thought they were a lot of fun. The story, kind of whatever, it's just kind of an excuse to drive the action, but I'm cool with it, and I really, really like the world. I like the idea of the vampire hunter union. I like the whole, underground society that this, drives. That worked for me. Like gangbusters, I'd be down for another one, but I might be in the minority here because the movie, it got mixed reviews at best. It's not super, super beloved or anything like that. I don't think a lot of people actually bothered to watch it. And those that did maybe had much more lukewarm feelings about it than I did. But I was in. I'm really into this movie. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make my doctorate level selection. I don't care. I'm doing it. So here we are. And I am recommending it. If you like action movies, if you like vampire movies, if you like Jamie Foxx, I would definitely check all of this out for any of those reasons because it worked for me. It's fun. Manage your expectations. Know what you're getting. It's just a fun vampire action flick. Is it as good as Blade? Not quite, but it's fun for sure. So yeah, definitely a recommend from me. But if you've seen it and you have differing opinions, of course, let me know. You have the same opinion, let me know because I like to be reaffirmed just like anybody else. But yeah, let me know what you think of Day Shift because again, not everybody loving it. So some mixed opinions. Let's get some of that discussed in the comments below. So that's our doctorate level selection for the horror action subgenre. But of course, I've got a extra credit selection for you as well. Our extra credit selection is End of Days. End of Days came out in 1999, and I can already hear some of you. But hear me out, because I'm going to argue that this movie is a hilariously fun, guilty pleasure movie, even though it is not a good movie. And those of you who've seen it or even just heard about it, you already know that. You already know. But you know what? I couldn't help myself. I had to talk about it somewhere. We're talking about it here. If you haven't seen it before, the movie stars Arnold Schwarzenegger as Jericho Kane, a former cop who finds himself embroiled in some sort of religious plot where a woman is being groomed to be the host for the Antichrist. Satan is going to impregnate her so that she can basically bear the Antichrist, and once he is born, he will bring rise to the end of days, and Arnold Schwarzenegger has to stop it by essentially punching the devil. And it's as great as it sounds. The movie is notoriously known as a bad movie. I'm not even going to try to hide that from you. In fact, when I first saw it, because it takes itself seriously, I went in expecting it to be a serious movie. I grew up in the 80s. I loved myself some Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. We just talked about Predator. So, I was hyped for Arnie, but this is not peak Arnie. This is Arnie, a little down the road. And I was excited for an Arnold Schwarzenegger horror movie. I was. But I have to admit, I was disappointed when I saw this movie. I went in expecting something awesome, and came out really disappointed in this movie. And for a long time, just kind of blew it off and just let it go away. But other people would talk about it, so I had to revisit it. And yeah, it became kind of this unintentionally hilarious guilty pleasure movie. I mean, the idea that Arnold's main character name is Jericho Kane gives you a pretty good idea of what this movie's trying to do, and trying to do it straight faced, no tongue in cheek, no Arnold wisecracks, which is kind of weird because that's what he's known for. But he's trying to play it serious here, and they're trying to play it straight, and that is what makes it so funny. It really winds up being unintentionally hilarious. And what's wild is it is a big budget movie, and not in addition to Arnie, there is a really good cast here. Robin Tunney playing the main girl, Gabriel Byrne, Kevin Pollak, CCH Pounder, Udo Kier. Udo Kier's in this movie. Like there's a lot of talent going on in this movie, and none of them are good. Nobody's really doing a good job. It's hilarious. It's because it's a bad movie. It's a bad script. I mean, it's a real bad script. Like the Christ in New York connection is all you need to know. And those of you who've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Christ in New York part is the epitome of terrible screenwriting. Absolutely terrible. And it's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. There is actually some bona fide good stuff in this movie. There's some good scenes, some good images, some cool like shots and stuff like that, where they've done some stuff that is bona fide, genuinely creepy or clever or kind of, just kind of actually objectively good, but it is always undercut by something bad, whether it's a bad performance or just a bad line reading or just a bad line or a cheesy effect. Some of the ending effects are pretty cheesy, but there's just so many bad things in here that are so bad they're good, is I guess the argument I'd be making here. From the Christ in New York to the incestual mother-daughter threesome, because why? Why is that in there? I don't know. Let's roll with it. Punching Satan, shooting Satan. It's awesome, man. I have gone from being disappointed in this movie to actually thoroughly enjoying this movie as a so bad it's good. Watch it with your friends and laugh at it kind of movie. And if it hadn't been so earnest, if it was trying to play it tongue in cheek, if Arnold was cracking his one-liners and winking at the camera, I think it would just be a bad movie. But the fact that it's trying so hard to be scary and cool and edgy and mysterious and everything, it fails on like every level. And so, yeah, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. And so I was like, you know what? We're going to talk about it on the channel. And I'm guessing a lot of you have seen it too. But do you agree with me? Is it so bad it's good? Is it a fun watch for you? Or do you just find it painful and you can't check it out? I would implore you to try it again if that's the way you feel. And try to look at it and just revel in the awesome badness of it, because it is terrible and it's so much fun. So that is my endorsement of End of Days. If you haven't seen it, go in, get drunk first, or while you're doing it, have friends over and have a good time with it, because it can be a blast if you'll just let it be. So that's going to be it for our doctorate level exploration of horror action. I do like action movies, not as much as horror movies, obviously, but I do enjoy them quite a bit. I grew up on them. So blending the two together is fun for me. And I find that these movies that we talked about today, very fun. Would recommend them both just to have a good time. Neither of them are deep. Neither of them are great, but they're both a lot of fun. So definitely check them out and then let me know what you think. And now I think it's time to check out a horror trivia pursuit card. And this is, of course, where I try to answer a question live on camera. And because of day shift, we're going to go with the monster category. And coincidentally, well, let me just read the question. You'll see where I'm going with this. Abby is revealed to be what type of supernatural being in 2010's Let Me In? Now, we have talked about Let Me In and its original Swedish movie, Let the Right One In, quite a bit. And I'm betting for all you horror fans, almost all of you are going to know this one. But even if you haven't seen the movie, if you've heard of the movie, you already know what this is about. And what kind of supernatural being Abby is. And yeah, as always, I wouldn't have remembered Abby, but I sure as hell know what Abby is. Those movies are great. And I love them. And without spoiling the answer, I will say that I think that the original one epitomizes one of the best of its genre. Honestly, it's that good of a movie. The remake, which is what they're talking about here, Let Me In, is good too, and I like it for different reasons because I feel like they did bring something a little bit slightly different to the table, and I talked about that a little bit. I think maybe was it in my American remakes video, maybe. I think that's what it was. I'm not quite sure, but I did talk about it. When I talked about it, I talked about how I thought they did a pretty good job of adding a little bit while still retaining the large, broad strokes of the movie. It's a remake I actually like quite a bit, but the original is a masterpiece. The remake good, the original is a masterpiece. But I'm kind of treading water here, letting you think about this. But you guys know this one, right? Like if you've heard of Let the Right One In, if you've heard Let Me In, you know this. I mean, even if you haven't, you might be able to just from the title, maybe even be able to figure it out. So that's your last clue. Wrap it up. Lock in your answer because I'm answering. Abby is a vampire. She's a vampire. Let's just double check the card. Vampire. A vampire. It says it right there on the card. And yeah, I thought as soon as I saw the question, I thought it was hilarious because I decided to read the monster subcategory or category on the card because of Day Shift, which is about vampires, which are monsters, and then there was a vampire question. So I thought that was pretty funny. But that's the answer. Hopefully you got it. I'm guessing you guys did. And if you didn't, what did you guess? I'd like to know about those wrong answers because they make me laugh. That's it for today's video. Next week we'll be doing something completely different. But until then,